right, our topic for this afternoon is biodiversity. We're moving into a new unit, and hopefully, like I said in class, this will be the bow on the package. We've been talking about a lot of things in class, and maybe or may not, you guys have seen the connection. So hopefully in this unit, you're going to see how all of those things are going to come together. So make sure, we haven't done this in a while, that you take notes, that you ask some questions, and you need to make sure you have your journal. If you don't have your journal, you left it in the classroom, you left it in your locker, at least get a sheet of notebook paper and come back to class tomorrow with the activities and some of the things written down. We can always get it into your journal. Remember, you can always push pause when you need to. Go back, watch me again if you have to. Ask questions. You can message me right away on Edmodo, or write them down in your journal and ask questions in class tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to talk about biodiversity. I know you've heard that word before. You know what it means. But again, remember we talk about stretching our knowledge, which you've heard before when you were in 5th grade or 6th grade or maybe even 4th grade. Doesn't fit your 7th grade understanding anymore. So we're going to stretch it and add to it. All right. So biodiversity. The first thing I want to talk about with biodiversity is its definition. So up here at the top, remember if it's written in blue, you probably need to write it down. And there are some things in here that are not written in blue. And I'll say, hey, make sure you write it down. Make sure you get it done. All right. So bio means life. And diverse means different. You know that. We've heard about it before. We've learned about it before. So write that down. Bio means life, and diverse means different. So when we put that together, the definition that you'll see on a test or on a quiz is the variety of life in an ecosystem. Okay. We use the term biotic to describe all living things, whether it's plants or animals. We saw the pond water. We've seen microscopic living things. So even microbiotic living, microbiology, microscopic living things, they all play into this. So push pause, make sure you have that written down. Come back if you need to. And we're going to go on. So written in red here in the middle is just the whole big idea that we're going to focus on for the next couple of weeks. Is the greater the variety of species in an ecosystem, the healthier that ecosystem is going to be. The more living things you have there, the more complex the food chains and the food webs and all of that will be. So you need to make sure that you write this down, that the greater the variety of species in an ecosystem, the healthier that ecosystem is. Okay, so push pause if you have to. Make sure you have this written down in your notes or write it down in your journal. Come on back when you're ready. Okay, so we've got the big idea, all right? Well, we've got to get to that point. We've got to ask some questions. So the big idea, and now we're like, how? How does, the big question, the big Q is, how? How does an ecosystem get good biodiversity? How does that happen? How does an ecosystem become biodiverse? How does it happen overnight? How long does it take? What conditions have to be right for an ecosystem to be considered biodiverse? Okay. How does an ecosystem stay that way? Once it's reached a level of biodiversity and it's healthy, is it healthy forever? Or does it have to keep that? Does it have to go through some processes, some steps? How does an ecosystem lose, or does it lose biodiversity? What happens if it loses its biodiversity? What can make an ecosystem lose its biodiversity? So those are some big questions. You do not need to write those down, but you need to think about those things. Those are going to be our driving questions over the next couple of days as we answer that big question. Okay, how? So the big answer down here at the bottom is we're going to answer all of those over the next couple of weeks. But you already know, and this is the good news, you already know some of these answers. You may have learned them in other classes, but you've already learned some of these answers. Remember I said at the very beginning, maybe what we've been learning doesn't seem to be real connected. It is. We've all been learning little bits and pieces to answer some of these questions of the big Qs. Okay, so right now in your journal, this is what I want you to do. Get your instructions here, push pause, and then actually do this. You gotta write some things down. Brainstorm. I want you to think, which actually means you have to write a few notes in your journal. The topics that are going to help you answer the big questions. So here comes the brainstorm. Okay, so I want you to think about what you know about what we've already learned. So here they are. We've already talked about in class catastrophic events. You guys did a wonderful paper slide presentation on the catastrophic events, and part of your research was to ask, what does it does to the eco? What does this do to the ecosystem? So if you research volcanoes, you know what a volcano can do to an ecosystem. If you did the tsunamis, you know what a tsunami, how it can affect negatively or maybe even positively in an ecosystem. So you know, how does this help with biodiversity? How does it hurt with biodiversity? So hopefully that'll give you some ideas. The next thing that we've talked about is weathering, erosion, and deposition. How does weathering, erosion, and deposition affect your abiotic factors in your landscape, the non-living factors? Okay. We've learned about Texas ecoregions. And in each Texas ecoregion, you had to tell me what kind of rainfall and how much, what were the temperatures like, the elevation, what kind of plants were living there. So you've done that research. So that should also help you talk about maybe some of our ecosystems here in Texas and answer that question about, well, how did they get to be biodiverse? Are there a lot of living things there? Are there not a lot of living things there? And then the last thing that we've talked about was water. You know, water quality, pollution. Where is the water? Is it a desert? Are there aquifers nearby? Some of those water terms that we talked about, the permeability of the rock, the porosity of the rock. Is the water allowed to infiltrate the ground? Those are all words that you learned, hopefully. And so water, in its role in the ecosystem and its role in how we become biodiverse, is very important. So take for just a second, and I challenge you to write down at least one thing that you learned in each of these 4 topics that can help us answer that big question about biodiversity. How does catastrophic events affect biodiversity? How does weathering, erosion, deposition, how does that affect biodiversity? The Texas ecoregions, what did that teach you about biodiversity here in our very state? And then water. How does water affect the biodiversity of life? So, you know more than you think you do. So I challenge you. Push pause, brainstorm a little bit, bring those back into class. I want to share across the room because I'm curious to see how many of you have the same in your different answers. So push pause for a second, do your brainstorm on each of these 4 topics, at least one thing, and come on back and we'll finish up. All right, the very last thing that I want you to do, and I want you to have this in class tomorrow, but if you don't have it, you're not going to participate. You're not going to have a good discussion. All right, so it's our adventure time. I want you to bring it to class so we can talk this out. First thing I want you to do is I want you to draw this. It's a bullseye. It's a bullseye with 4 circles. Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4 areas. Okay, and then I want you to add these words down here at the bottom. I want you to put them where you think they belong in this graphic organizer, which is really all it is. Okay, so we've got the word species, we've got the word population, we've got the word ecosystem, and we've got the word community. So draw this in your journal or on a sheet of notebook paper, and then put these words where you think they'll fit. And I'll kind of give you a hint. This is a biggest to smallest. So the biggest idea to the smallest idea. So organize those in a way that makes sense to you, and when we get back to class tomorrow, we're going to talk this out. As always, if you have any questions, message me on Edmodo right away, or write them down in your paper. Make sure you ask in class tomorrow.